Hello everyone, it is Reese here, and you join me again for another monthly roundup. And we're half the way through the year already. It's bizarre. I will plough on with my list of my July films, little reviews, little summaries, little thoughts. And so this month I managed to watch 10 things. It's been a bit of a busy month for me, with a whole load of sort of life changes and the publication of my first monograph. But in the midst of all of that, I found time to watch 10 things for the first time, of which I think 6 were from my the 1,000 film list. So I'm going to crack on, and we begin the start of the month with Kind Hearts and Coronets, an Ealing comedy. If you know me, you know that I'm not overly, I'm not massively into the Ealing comedies. I don't think any of them are particularly that good. This is kind of sort of half crime thriller, half about a man who is someone played by Dennis Price, who essentially been cut out of a family and decides to get revenge on the family by killing every single member of the family that stand between him and sort of inheriting the fortune. And essentially every member of the family is played by Alec Guinness. Um, this is vaguely entertaining. It's probably one of the better Ealing films I've seen, I guess. Um, there is, I think Dennis Price as a central lead is quite is enjoyable enough, and the I say Guinness is having fun with, although he only really, if we're honest, although he plays a lot of the roles, he's maybe only really sort of having time in 3, 4 of them, and the others are sort of best left as sort of cameos or sort of vignettes. An amazing scene in which sort of some kind of older old lady shot out the sky in a hot air balloon or something, which is greatly entertaining. Yeah, it's all right. I don't think the sort of the ending twist, as it were, as it tries to make itself out, is particularly. So yeah, if you like the Ealing stuff, you'll like this. I'm not overly Ealing-y, but there you are. What can you say? Enola Holmes 3, so the first one in the Enola Holmes franchise, with Millie Bobby Brown as Enola, sort of the secret sister of Sherlock Holmes. I haven't seen the other 2 of these films, so this film kicks off. Enola is getting married to some character who I believe was in the previous films. Sherlock, played by Henry Cavill, is invited to the wedding, but then the wedding's in Malta and he gets kidnapped, and so she sort of has to figure out where he is. This is, again, it's light enough. I'd seen this film shortly after I saw the interview with Matt Damon talking about how sort of Netflix films have to be overly simplified and overly explained and that just to keep up with an audience. And I couldn't unsee it in this film. So this is a Netflix original film. And the sort of the constant fourth wall breaks by the Millie Bobby Brown character, and the way that sort of the plot and developments are constantly re-explained, and sort of the general sort of political ethos of Netflix all consolidate in this film. It's fine, throwaway enough. Yeah, I presume if people have seen the other 2, they may enjoy or they may not. I sort of didn't have that coming with me, but yeah. Again, sort of fluff enough if you're into it. On the sort of, if so, you think I'm being controversial, let us speak about Citizen Vigilante, which I watched as I saw the outlash here. So this is Uwe Boll's new film. Uwe Boll, who is the German filmmaker who is sort of famous for being sort of quite rubbish, making lots of video game adaptations and sort of controversial films. And this film has been the subject of quite a lot of political controversy as of late. The alleged premise is that it stars Armie Hammer as a guy who is sort of essentially in some sort of ill-defined Europe, and is going around killing foreign criminals who sort of are illegal immigrants and killing people who have sort of facilitated them being in the country. And it's pitched as this sort of, this sort of dangerous right-wing power fantasy. If you're watching the film after that, it doesn't deliver that. It's the problem really with this film is that it's quite boring. It only really delivers on that premise, if that's the premise you're after, in sort of the final sort of 10-15 minutes or so. The rest of it is just sort of the Armie Hammer character going around sort of spouting bizarre monologues and doing things that are sort of At one point, he sort of is distracted by mold on a ceiling. He sort of gets annoyed by kids not buying a bus ticket. All these things. It's a baffling film. So sort of it's hard to rate. I couldn't rate it as an enjoyable film. I couldn't rate it as the film that sort of it purports itself to be. Um, I'm not even touching the controversy of whether films like this should exist or that. I'm generally quite sort of if people want to make films, they can, and the markets and culture can react to them as they do, within the limits of sort of appropriateness. But yeah, the film is its cardinal fault is that it's really boring, in truth. Same can not be said about Evil Dead Burn. So this was the last of the sort of the new films that I saw this month. The sixth instalment in the Evil Dead cinematic franchise, directed by Sebastian Vanecek, who you would know if you're a French horror person from Vermine or Infested. Stars a woman who her husband dies. On at his funeral, they go back to the family will go back to the sort of family home, and the family home is besieged by by the Deadites. And this film is brutal, absolutely brutal in the way that sort of all good Evil Dead films should be. It's really brutal. Elements of levity, but really brutal, and I enjoyed this. This may have been, or maybe not. This is a strong case of being my highlight of the month, I think. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Spoke with me a lot of violence, a lot about sort of toxic family dynamics. This one really landed. I think some of the set pieces and the camera work in this are gorgeous. Sort of the way the camera responds to sort of a boat set sequence at the start of the film, and the way it sort of tracks through the house. All these things, it looks so visually impressive, and it sort of has that requisite level of violence and horror. Again, recommended, especially if you're an Evil Dead fan. I would recommend. Now I'm going to take sort of a segue into the world of my list of the 1001 films, and I begin with the 1943 Italian film Ossessione, directed by Luchino Visconti. It's a film about a sort of a drifter who's about Italy. He happens upon an inn run by sort of an old man and his younger wife, and conspires with the wife to kill the husband. No spoilers, but sort of as their plot takes steam, suddenly sort of the reactions between the relationships between the two start to chafe. This film is kind of placed in the same camp as the sort of Italian neo-realist films of this period, things like Bicycle Thief or Rome Open City as well. And it is often suggested to be one of the first ones. This is, it's a film that sort of is depicting really sort of domestic boredom and sort of the reactions of essentially characters are all static and stationary and sort of are in a world where they're kind of not really kind of there's no chance for upwardness. This is a film emerging out of that war climate. It's kind of, I was sort of mixed on this because sort of I enjoyed the central narrative crux of it, but I've really historically struggled with the Italian neo-realist films. I watched a bunch on modules when I was a undergrad student, and it's never really been something that's spoken to me. So sort of the actual sort of crime and sort of the crime and the kind of the psychological elements of this I quite enjoyed. And there's a lot of it that is slice of life going around stalls, and there's like a fair in one point, I think, with a sort of a Spanish character, and it's sort of a film of two halves for me, I would say. It's remarkably better than where I went next, so sort of two films that were not going to speak to me at all. So Pi, so the feature film debut, I believe, of Darren Aronofsky. Pi is a black and white film, a sort of an art film about a sort of a maths genius, and who starts to sort of see links between numbers and reality, and sort of is pursued, or perhaps not, by kind of religious leaders, government figures, etc. Um, it's a film that is like many of Aronofsky's. There's a lot of inherent ambiguity in it. Um, we do not know what we're seeing. We do not know if what we're seeing is true. We don't know if the man is sort of having sort of psychotic breaks, if he's actually being pursued. There's a lot of questions about religion, the role of reality. But if I'm honest, I struggle to engage. I really struggle to engage. This is not the sort of thing that speaks to me. It's ostensibly a thriller, but it did very, very little. I have to be honest. Yeah, it's a film that is a sort of very interesting. I found it more interesting than enjoyable. I think it's probably fair. But anything really sort of is a highlight compared to where I went next. So it is well documented. It is well sort of, I've talked about this a lot. But I do not get on with experimental film and art film. I really find it tough, and it does nothing for me. And Stan Brakhaj's Dog Star Man. This was one of the toughest things to sit through. I think I've experienced it in a long, long time. Um, so the film, so I saw the sort of the long version. So there are sort of 5 short films brought together into one. Um, this does nothing for me at all. So I can't even explain it. It's just lots of imagery. Allegedly it's some sort of cosmological epic. There is kind of a period where someone's climbing a tree and climbing a mountain and going to chop down a tree. This was just, I did not connect with this at all. It's kind of it's experimental film. It is playing with the medium of film. It's playing with images and representations, and for some people that will be incredible. For me, it was not. This was not something that landed with me in the slightest. I do not believe, fortunately, that there are any more art films on my list. I watched it, I've seen it, I understand that it's Brakhaj's best film. Take it or leave it. I mean, I would say sort of, try it yourself as you want, put on a couple of minutes, you'll very, very quickly get a sense of if it's something for you. The Bigamist. So a film noir from 1953, directed by Ida Lupino, and she appears in the film as well. And this is a film that, it's a film that is sort of heartbreaking in its inevitability. So there's a couple that want to adopt a child. The adoption agent is sort of doing his sort of general rounds of checking and ensuring everything, and discovers that the man has a secret other wife. And then there are sort of copious amounts of flashbacks as we learn how the man got into the situation. It is yes, this is kind of a I enjoyed this. So even though kind of the central crux of we're not meant to know where we're going, it's kind of spoiled by the fact that the title of the film is what it is. The film really kind of screws, and so the central character was played by Edmund O'Brien. The film is very sort of careful in its treatment of him, and it very clearly wants us to know that what he's doing is wrong, but it lays out the deck very, very sympathetically. His 2 wives, Joan Fontaine and Lupina herself, are 2 quite different women who are offering him different things. And then when we get to the conclusion that inevitably has to come, it's kind of heartbreaking almost, as I say, in its inevitability. It really, really is. Edmund Gwenn, who you'll know perhaps best as Santa Claus in the original Miracle on 34th Street, is the adoption agent, and his reality was sort of towards the point of the climax where he says he both hates and pities them. And I think it's kind of the summary. Yes, it'll be. I enjoyed this. This is not a film I'd ever heard of. This is not one I came across before, and I would say, yeah. There's the ambiguity here, the sympathy and ambiguity that it wants to deploy in equal measure, I think really This is an interesting one. I would recommend if you haven't seen it. My second, my next film, and my penultimate film, is a game one I'd never heard of before. So this is another new one I'd read by Max Ophuls, and it is based. There is a young a woman, married woman played by Joan Bennett, who her daughter is involved with a criminal, and there's an accident in which the criminal is killed. The mother assumes that her daughter has killed him and sort of decides to cover it up, and is then subsequently chased by a gangster played by James Mason who wants to blackmail her. The film is, again, it's an interesting one. In that there are elements, I was mixed on this. There are elements of this that I quite like. The dynamic between Bennett and Mason is always sort of a very charismatic but frightening figure. In when he plays roles like this, I'm thinking, of course, Pet Sematary. I'm not. I'm thinking Salem's Lot. Ignore me. It's the sort of central premise is quite interesting, but the film kind of meanders and doesn't really go anywhere. So it's at its best for its interplay between the leads. They're sort of the kind of half romantic, half not, because she's married and things. It's interesting tension, but the film kind of meanders and doesn't really know where it wants to go. So it's sort of mixed. I would say I'm sort of 50. It's quite a short film, and yet there's elements of it that really feel like they're dragging on. So go with that as you will. I'm going to leave it to my last film. So a film I watched last night as of recording, which is Mel Brooks's High Anxiety. So I'm a big Mel Brooks fan. I mean, if you're a fan of comedy, sort of, who isn't? And this is one that had slipped under my radar. That I'd sort of knew about, but I'd never had the chance to see. So I opted to watch. And this is a spoof of the world of Alfred Hitchcock, in which Brooks himself plays a psychiatrist who has an intense fear of heights, the high anxiety of the title. He goes to work at a mental institution, and essentially suspects that there are secrets going on, and secrets that some of the staff members may be willing to commit murder to keep. As he investigates, he's brought into the world of a famous Hitchcock blonde, played by the ever-brilliant Madeline Kahn. This is again another interesting film. So I think this is one that you really want to have seen a lot of Hitchcock to kind of get a lot out of this. There are certain elements of this that don't really land in their own right. They're sort of interesting, but if you've seen the sort of the relevant Hitchcock films, they really, really like a bunch. Sort of the photographer, say at the start, being like Tom Curtin or whatever. A bird's. But some of it is really funny. I mean, it's Mel Brooks. Scenes with a werewolf appearing, a spoof of the birds, and the Psycho scene that crops up in a way that I won't ruin. Of course, it's a Mel Brooks comedy, so even the sort of, it's not the producers, it's not Young Frankenstein, but it's still a very solid, very funny film, and backed out with a cast of sort of Mel Brooksian regulars. So Brooks in Khan, Cloris Leachman returns, Harvey Korman, and these guys are both staff in the hospital, and this is really, really good fun. I would, it's sort of wonderful, as of many of the Brooks parodies. It's wonderful as a parody of Hitchcock. There is a clear affection for it that I think the best parodies really, really bring in. There is a clear sense of love for the director, and I'm told, I read that Brooks did have a sort of meeting or such with Hitchcock. He consulted him when directing the screenplay. It spoofs kind of the also sort of the psychoanalytical underpinnings that critics have read in these films as well. I think this is really, really fun, and it's sort of a solid film in its own right, really funny. Yes. Let me. So this is where I wrap up. I wrap up having wrapped up the month on a sort of selection of, I think, quite a mixed month in truth. Film-wise, there are sort of, how many films would I say were sort of definite wins for me? You're looking at what? Maybe, yeah, maybe 2 that were explicit wins and a few more that I mixed on. So perhaps not the sort of the strongest month for me in terms of my overall enjoyment, although a nice mix. But this was a good a place on which to wrap up. So I conclude there. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found these thoughts interesting. If you've seen any of these films, I'd love to know your thoughts. I'd love to hear about the kind of the films you've been watching this month as well. Let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching as always. You see the links to my LinkedIn and Instagram on the bottom if you want to join me on my film watching journey. Comment below if there's other stuff you want me to make or react to. Make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell so you know when a new video is coming. Otherwise, thank you so much, and I will look forward to seeing you all in the next one.